afternoon. The Committee on Health and Human Services, Health Insurance Reform, Economic Development, and Senior Citizen now convenes this public hearing. Public hearing notices were given to the public via the media. First notice on Tuesday, September 2nd, 2014, and second notice on Friday, September 5th, 2014. For the record, today is Wednesday, September 10, and the time now is 2:01 p.m. The committee will hear and accept testimonies, both oral and written, on the following. Bill 381-32, an act to establish the Anesthesiologist Assistant Act. The executive appointment of Mr. John Rios as Administrator of the Guam Economic Development Authority, as well as the committee will receive a testimony on the status of the Hotel Occupancy Tax bond projects. This would be a continuation of the August 7th, 2014 informational hearing. Okay, so we'll start off, or before I do that, I'd like to recognize Senator Tom Atta for being with us this afternoon. Thank you, Senator. Senator Brent McCready and Senator Aline Yamashita. Thank you very much. So we'll start off with Bill 381. I'd like to call up Dr. Reynold Lim, Dr. Harrison, Melissa Weibel, and Miriam. Oh, it's just you, right? That's sorry. That's okay. Great. Thank you very much for being here. And as the sponsor of the measure, just a brief description about what this legislation is about. Bill 381 is an act to establish the Anesthesiologist Assistant Act by adding a new Article 25 to Chapter 12, Part 2, Title 10 of Guam Code annotated. What this bill, the intent of this legislation is to establish the practice of Anesthesiologist Assistant Act and to designate the Guam Board of Medical Examiners as the governing body, which shall have full regulatory purview and administrative authority over the licensure and conduct of anesthesiologist assistant. And so this is something that I've worked with Dr. Lim and other anesthesiologists over at the Guam Memorial Hospital. And I'm happy that Melissa from the Guam Surgery Center is here, who the other anesthesiologist serves at. And so this is sometime late last year that we've looked into this. I've got information, try to put it together. And so what this does is provide the authority for the Board of Medical Examiners to put together regulations to allow for anesthesiology assistants who are not doctors but are trained, who are educated and trained to be able to be the assistants of these anesthesiologists. And so we'll have Dr. Lim, who is the chief anesthesiologist of the hospital, explain a little bit more, and from there we'll have the others provide testimony. Okay, Dr. Lim?
Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Dr. Lim. Reynold Lim. I'm the chair of the Department of Anesthesia of Guam Memorial Hospital. The Department of Anesthesia actually did approach Senator Rodriguez to come up with a bill defining the role of the anesthesiologist assistants. Now, this, as he mentioned out, these are not physicians, but what we call extenders, physician extenders, or mid-level practitioners. The education background of these anesthesiologist assistants, they basically is, I would term probably a masteral level education, and they undergo specifically training for the delivery of anesthesia. It's similar to physician assistants, assistant basically, in the same similar end. I would say, just like the CRNAs, they are also mid-level providers of anesthesia care. The anesthesiologist assistants are basically required to be under the direction of the anesthesiologist. So we basically are responsible for them. And for me, it also gives an option to Guam that we have, should we have a problem, and we did have some problems in anesthesia providers way back, that we were able not to stop any services that's critical, surgical services that is critical to the people of Guam. Thank you.
Great. Doctors, before we go forward, I think you touched up on the fact that there was a shortage of anesthesiologists on Guam, and I think even to a certain extent today is not in a level where it supports the demand of surgery. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about that and about how these anesthesiologist assistants would work if it's something approved, and how the physician, the anesthesiologist MD like yourself would actually put their license on the line to have these assistants under you.
So basically, we have these anesthesiologist assistants that are basically in a room with a patient. So is the MD, the anesthesiologist. And depending on, and it varies from state to state, the direction ratio, they do have, what we are allowed, the anesthesiologists are allowed to direct ranges from 1:2, 1:3, and some, I think, is 1:4. I think us, a body then, basically, we will have these essential, there's 2 anesthesiologist assistants, so we would have them in both rooms. And the doctor, the anesthesiologist will be the one responsible. We'll be with them when they provide the medication, the critical moments of the anesthetic care. And us being responsible, we have direct oversight on how the anesthesiologist assistants manage the patient and what drugs to give and what the anesthetic plan will be to the best interest, to the best safety of the patient.
Thank you very much, Doc. Melissa?
Can you hear me okay? I'm actually coming out in opposition of having anesthesia assistants on Guam. It's a lower level of care. It's true they are a master's prepared individual, but they don't have to have a medical background before they go into that to get to their master's. So their bachelor's could be in English, and they can then they can go into the practice of anesthesia. So they've got a lower level of knowledge than what the CRNAs have to go through in order to become an anesthesia provider. So I don't know why we'd want to go backwards. We can, at the surgery center, we also utilize anesthesia to take care of our patients. I have a medical director that is an anesthesiologist who provides the overall safety for the treatment plans for all of our patients, including those patients that are being monitored by nurse anesthetists. And there are times when we have difficulty as far as how many providers we've got available, but I've never had an instance where I cannot get a provider who's already licensed on Guam to work, or who's at the same level that currently exists in the law, in other words, an MD or a CRNA. I've never had trouble getting either one of those to fill positions at the surgery center. So I don't know why we would need to go to another provider that, for me and for other nurses, I've talked with my other nurses as well, that we believe this to be a lower standard of care, not an equal standard of care to a CRNA. And certainly CRNAs are a lower standard of care to an MD. There's a lot of knowledge and training that need to go into a patient being treated with anesthesia, not just the anesthesia itself, but their medical background and what's going on as a whole with that patient as you're giving them medications. So as far as the Guam Surgery Center is concerned, we would never hire an anesthesia assistant, whether they are legally licensed on this island or not.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for that. And I think you made a statement earlier that all they need is like an English degree, right? Yeah, and so we, that's the initial concerns that were brought up to the committee, but then we were provided, facts on what is really required. And I think Dr. Lim, afterwards, I'll give him the opportunity to just respond to that. Okay, thank you. Doc?
I'm Dr. Harris. I'm an anesthesiologist at Guam Memorial Hospital. So I'd like to say that the perception that it's a lower level of care is completely incorrect. The American Society of Anesthesiologists recognizes that the training of both anesthesiologist assistants and CRNAs and anesthesiologists prepares them all to adequately deliver anesthesia in a safe manner. the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, as well in a joint statement with the ASA. They feel that as anyone who has gone through a qualified anesthesia training program and is licensed and privileged to deliver anesthesia it meets the qualifications of being an adequate provider, whether they're an AA, a CRNA, or an anesthesiologist. And that statement also, in fact, does point out that they feel that anytime regional anesthesia is being delivered in OB, a physician should be physically present and available at all times. So whether it's an AA or CRNA involved in the care, they still feel that a physician should always be present. The training of anesthesiologist assistants was looked into by various states. The Kentucky legislature looked at numerous studies, and it was determined that the training is equivalent to a CRNA, that there's no difference, and that any prior clinical training that is required did not affect the overall outcome. It may have provided a slight advantage at the beginning of training, but at the end there was no difference. And they also found that the requirements for AAs to enter the programs are the same requirements that are needed to enter medical school, all the entire pre-med requirements, and they found that that was indeed an advantage and served to more prepare the AAs and deliver a better end of training outcome. And that's probably due to that type of training. The classes that are required, the chemistry, the biochemistry, organic chemistry, physics, training the mind in how to think and how to deal with situations. So there's no studies that have validated this idea of that there's a lower level of care or training to AAs. In fact, it's the opposite. All the evidence has shown that they're equivalent to CRNAs and more than adequate to deliver anesthesia. And there definitely has been a shortage of anesthesia providers on Guam in the past. I would say it was around 5 or 6 years ago, there was only one single solitary provider for GMH. And then for a while there were only two. And the operating room had to be shut down completely for anything except emergency cases. And so it was very recently in the past that there was an inadequacy of providers. And even at the hospital now, we have 6 full-time anesthesiologists and 1 part-time anesthesiologist, and we're just at the minimum to provide care. If we're all involved in a case and there's an emergency, there's nothing that can be done. And so this model of supervision where you have 2 people involved in the care provides the safest anesthesia. It's called the anesthesia care team. And the reason it's the safest is because you have 2 people. You have 1 person with the patient at all times, and intermittently and at the critical moments you have 2 people. And so if a problem ever happens, when 1 person is the patient, they have a second person that they can call on who is supposed to be immediately available, and that person who is trained in that field of anesthesia and providing anesthesia care. Now you have 2 people available. What we have at GMH right now, for example, is we all do our own cases. If we're all busy and there's an emergency, we have no one to call for help. And it also, this model increases efficiency because you have somebody free to float around. So while somebody's in the room with the patient, the next case can be seen by the anesthesiologist and prepared for the upcoming surgery. The pre-op evaluation can be done. Any additional testing or evaluation that needs to be done can be completed in a more timely manner so that they're ready to go into the OR immediately instead of large delays. It also provides more safety because you have somebody who's available to address the problems that may occur in the recovery unit. Again, right now, if we're all dealing with patients in the rooms and something happens in recovery, there's no one available. If there's an airway emergency in the hospital, somebody codes, somebody has some trouble breathing, and we're all busy in the room, we're not available. So this model is the safest model of all, and it doesn't really matter whether it's an AA being supervised or CRNA. It's the anesthesia care team that you have more people involved in the care of the patient.
Thank you. Can you just explain, Doc, the difference between a CRNA and an anesthesiologist assistant?
Well, a CRNA is a nurse who undergoes training to become an RN, and that could be through a 4-year bachelor's program or a 2-year associate's program. And then the CRNA programs usually require 1 to 2 years of intensive care work experience, and then their anesthesia training is usually around 24 months, sometimes longer. Anesthesiologist undergoes 4 years of undergraduate, which is weighted in the sciences, the pre-med requirements, then attends 4 years of medical school, and then undergoes anesthesia training program, which the first year is a preliminary year, usually internal medicine, sometimes a year of surgical training, with some type of basic doctor training, and then 3 years of specialized anesthesia training. And then an AA undergoes the pre-med requirements, and then similar to a CRNA, 24 months of specific anesthesia training. And then they're required to take an exam afterwards, which is a qualifying exam demonstrating they have the knowledge to provide anesthesia. There's another difference between AAs and CRNAs. CRNAs, when they take their examination, making them a certified registered nurse anesthetist, they never take any other exams again, whereas AAs are required to recertify their knowledge every 6 years.
And also in the delivery of care, CRNAs are able to do it on their own, right?
It depends on the state, actually. Some states, by law, do not allow CRNAs to practice independently. Other states, it started about 10 years ago. It was an insurance issue that they couldn't get reimbursement from Medicare if they were working unsupervised. And then I think under Bill Clinton, the law was changed to where if the governor felt that it was in the best interest of the state, main argument was due to a lack of care in rural areas, they could opt out of this requirement, and Medicare would reimburse CRNAs working independently. And so then there's about 17 states, I believe, that have opted out, and there's independent CRNA practice, and Guam is one of them. This opt-out really doesn't have anything to do with whether they're allowed to or not. It's whether the law allows them to or not. The opt-out prevented most of them from working independently because it wasn't financially tenable. They'd be working for free, basically. So it's mostly whether the state allows them to work independently or not. In Guam, CRNA is allowed to work independently, whereas AAs nowhere can they work independently. That is part of the entire model is that they are mandated to be supervised by a physician.
Okay, is that all, Doc? Okay.
There's one more thing I'd like to add. I don't think that there's any reason for any other surgical sites to have any fear of this bill. It won't hurt them, take away their current model. If anything, it adds to their abilities to, utilize another avenue that may or may not be even less expensive.
Okay.
And that's I think the intent of the bill is to give the people of Guam more options so that they're not pushed into a situation as they have before where there were only a couple options available for anesthesia delivery.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you just press that button so we can go off? Thank you. Dr. Lim, did you have...
Thank you. I also would like to add that we have provided also position papers from the American Society of Anesthesiologists, which is the overall body, the Society for Anesthesiologists. What they recommend basically is what we call an ACT, Anesthesia Care Team. And it doesn't matter whether it's a CRNA or an AA. Again, we already know that based on what Dr. Harrison said, we recognize them as equivalent. The main thing about the anesthesia care team is that the doctor, the anesthesiologist, is basically responsible for these mid-level providers, whether they're CRNAs or AAs. And being the overall responsibility falling on us, the anesthesiologists, actually we're not allowed to do any other case. When Melissa was saying, in the surgery center, basically they have CRNAs doing one room, but they also have an anesthesiologist providing care to another patient. The anesthesia care team prevents us from doing another case. We have to be free because we're supervising these mid-level providers, so we're free. We're not tied up providing anesthesia in another room. So I think that is why the American Society of Anesthesiologists believes that's the best way of delivering care.
Okay, thank you. I'll open if there's any questions. Senator Haddad, did you have?
Yeah, I just, the only thing I'm really familiar with about assistants in the room are the physician's assistant. So is an anesthesiologist assistant, can you equate are the two equivalent?
Yes, I would say very similar, that it's a physician extender. It's a medical provider who is not allowed to work on their own, that their decisions are based on either a pre-existing protocol or direct delegation of this is how you're going to do it. And there's a constant, in the case of anesthesia, there's a constant presence of the anesthesiologist in the immediate area. PAs, it depends on what they're doing. If they're a surgical PA, same thing, there's a direct oversight. If an office PA, maybe less, but these mid-level providers, PAs, you could say midwives, depending on how they're used. What are their other mid-levels? Escape me, but they're always, the person ultimately responsible is the physician, and they're the ones that make the final decision, and they're the ones that bear ultimate responsibility. So it's very similar to a PA. So this would be a PA who specializes in anesthesia delivery. One difference, though, in the utilization is that the AAs with this bill would be directly under the Board of Medicine rather than Allied Health, which we think is a better idea, provides much better oversight.
Melissa, did you have something to add?
Yeah, actually, I just had a question. Does the hospital now employ CRNAs?
No.
No, I don't believe so. But do they, Dr. Lim?
So we're looking at moving a bill to add a provider to Island when we're not actually using the providers that are available? Is that what I'm hearing?
We're looking to move towards providing a system, an alternative system, an additional system.
Okay. What we'll do is we are going to have a markup meeting on this bill before it's reported out. So we'll take the testimonies and if there's any other questions here. Senator Morrison, thank you. Senator San Nicolas, thank you for joining us. Senator Yamashita or Senator McCready, you have any questions? If not, there's nothing else to add, we did receive your written testimony. We'll make sure the senators receive the packet that you have provided as well with the fact sheet, the position sheet on AAs. And then we'll schedule a markup meeting at my office. We'll invite Melissa and all others who wish to participate before moving it forward. So that's my commitment. Okay? Great. If there's nothing else, thank you very much for your time. Thank you. We'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the executive appointment of Mr. John Rios as Administrator of the Guam Economic Development Authority. Anyone who wishes to provide testimony, if I can ask you to please come forward. Mr. Pangilinan, Senator Blas. Senator, thank you for being here. And please
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Senator Dennis, Senator Tom Adams, Senator Mike Siniclas, Senator Matt McCready, Senator Lina Machita, and Senator Tommy Morrison. I'm here to support the nomination of John Rios as the Administrator of Guam Economic Development Authority. I've known him all his life. We're related, been in Cueto and Taitano, and but more importantly, I've known him. He's in intimate knowledge of finances and accounting, and here most recently at the fiscal policy meetings when he was the director of BBMR, he did impressive all of us. He knows his numbers. He knows he's very knowledgeable in finance and accounting, and I know with his new job at Agita, he's again, he will impress all of us yet again. I know that recently at the rating agencies, he made a major input and impression to the rating agencies. So I'm certain that John will deliver for the people of Guam. So I'm here to support him fully.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pangilinan.
My name is John Pangilinan, and I used to be with the Bureau of Budget Management Research. And my testimony will be based on the past 3 years that I work under John Rios. And I would like to say it was a privilege to work with Mr. Rios. I believe he has strong management and leadership qualities, and also he has strong financial insights, given his prior experience with other departments. And he's also a staff management. He knows how to deal with people. And I believe that his attributes and experience will be greatly strong in his directorship with GITA, which is a very dynamic organization. And he does have some private experience. So I'm here in support of his nominations, and that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we do have your written testimony.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Yes, Senator Adam.
John, did you say you were with BBMR?
Yes.
Did you retire then?
No, I'm the acting deputy director for Department of Administration.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much. Okay. If there's no one else that wishes to testify, I'll now call the nominee, Mr. Rios.
Chairman Dennis Rodriguez and members of the Committee on Health and Human Services, Health Insurance Reform, Economic Development, and Senior Citizens. My name is John Rios, and I thank you for allowing me to testify today on my appointment to the position of Administrator of the Guam Economic and Development Authority. I look forward to continuing to work with the staff and management in carrying out the duties and responsibilities of the authority. This would include working with private and public organizations on their financial needs and other programs that would help stimulate economic growth on our island. I also look forward to working with this committee as Guam's economy continues to show signs of further strengthening. In addition to my strong desire to lead the authority forward, I also have educational and business credentials to help me achieve this goal. Most of my education was received here on Guam. I am a 1979 graduate of John F. Kennedy High School. I received a Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics from Regis College in Denver, Colorado in 1983. In 1995, I received a Master of Business Administration from the University of Guam. Over the last 30 years, I have worked a total of 14 years in the public sector, starting as Deputy Director of the Guam Energy Office, as Director of the Guam Retirement Fund, as the Executive Director here on the Guam Legislature under the late Speaker Ben Pangilinan, and Director of Bureau Budget and Management Research under our current Governor, Eddie Baza Calvo. The opportunity to work in these challenging positions has provided me with a significant set of management and leadership skills. In addition, I also possess 16 years of private sector employment. I initially started as a management trainee with Bank of the Orient, then as a credit manager and project supervisor at Motorola Inc., and finally as a business banking officer with First Hawaiian Bank. Again, Mr. Chairman and fellow committee members, I thank you for giving me this opportunity to testify before you today, and I humbly request your support for my confirmation as Administrator of the Guam Economic Development Authority. Sijuus Masi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rios. Senator Adat?
John, in your appointment packet, in your statement of financial interest, can you just explain a little bit on these businesses that you have an interest in?
Okay, the first business there, I believe, is C&J, which stands for Candy and Joe, which is C&J LLC, Candy and Joe, my parents. And it's a apartment rental and warehouse rental in Harmon. Okay, and those apartments are in Dededo, Sinahanya. And then the next one, AJRS, is not a active company right now. I would say about maybe 10, 12 years ago, we were doing electrical work. But right now, I keep it open, but it's not active company. And then the last one, MR LLC, which I own a minority interest, but it is a tower company. We provide services to the private sector, both IT&E, GTA. We also provide services to Motorola. I don't play an active employment with it, but we provide services such as installing towers, putting up antennas, running cables, etc. Strictly in the communication, which is the experience I received when I was working at Motorola.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Nicholas, you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, John.
Hi.
So, John, you're going to be coming from BBMR over to GITA.
That's correct. I've been at GITA right now for about 3 months as acting administrator, and then currently I am the deputy administrator.
Okay. My first question was with respect to something that was uncovered in a budget hearing that we had with the Guam Police Department. And I asked this in relation to work that was done in BBMR as it may relate to the work that's going to be done in GITA. Mm-hmm. When we were having our budget hearing with the Guam Police Department, we were informed by GPD that the reason why they weren't coming to the legislature with their actual budget request that they felt they needed to meet their needs was because BBMR was directing them to stay within a certain limit. Mm-hmm. Was that a directive that came from you, or was that a directive that came after you were acting at GPD?
What happens, and the process usually is, in fact, after the fiscal year, we request for all departments to submit, all line agency departments to submit their budget requests. And after looking at the revenues, the estimated or projected revenues, we then assign certain ceilings to each department. And that's how it actually starts. Yes, so basically, yes, if they're asking for a little bit more, but we feel that they can cut in these areas, then yes. The answer is yes to your question. Basically, we would say stay within the ceiling.
Okay. And the reason why, and I guess this is just all a learning experience also for me too, but it's something that kind of took me aback because I was always under the impression that when an agency would come and make a request with respect to their budget, that was what they felt, the agency felt that they would need in order to meet their needs. And I was a little taken aback and surprised that the agency was requesting what I viewed was a very constrained amount, and that was because of directives they were receiving with respect to their budget. And the reason why I asked this with respect to what's going to be happening in Gita is one of the things that's kind of taking me back also in what I've seen coming out of Gita since I've been in office is I've never seen a borrowing that Gita didn't like. You know, almost every kind of borrowing suggestion always came with a recommendation by Gita to go ahead and proceed with it. And some of the stuff that I've looked at were stuff that I said, you know, I'm not even comfortable moving in these directions. And so I'm trying to get a handle on exactly how these things, you know, how do the dominoes line up in order to result in an outcome. You know, are we lining them up because we're looking at what's going to actually work and be in the best interest of what we're trying to achieve, or are they lining up because we're trying to make what we're trying to achieve fit with another agenda?
Right.
And on the BBMR side, what concerned me was that the need for GPD, for example, far outweighed what I felt was the need for us to have a budget constraint imposed upon them for them to be able to come down here and be very clear of what they wanted. And I'm just concerned also that on the Gita side, that kind of environment might also continue to exist where if somebody wants to push forward a borrowing agenda, regardless of how it looks fiduciarily, you know, for the agency to consider, are we just going to continue to move forward these kind of proposals? Because there were some borrowing proposals from Gita that really I was like, why would you even recommend this? You know, and so how would you explain all of that to me to make me feel comfortable?
Going
that
first with GPD, I mean, it is usually in the beginning of the fiscal year when the budget is approved. They have to stick to the ceiling that they're. Now that doesn't mean that later on during the year, because you know, I do recall when I first started, a lot of officers coming and letting me know that, hell, you know, we haven't been paid overtime in 2 years, you know, and that was something that the governor and the CFA wanted to make sure that it was taken care of, and we've actually did that and even gotten up current at that time. And so that's one thing. With regards to Gita's loan, it first starts with a legislative approval, and then of course the governor approves. And now these are the bond. If you're talking about the bonds, then yes, it starts with a legislative approval, then goes to the governor for approval of the bill, and then we take action from there.
Actually, what it starts with usually is Gita comes to a senator and says, "Can you introduce this bill to go out and borrow for this purpose?" And then that's when the process gets started, because Gita initiates the borrowing procedure. And that's kind of where I'm at, because you know, senators, when you approach a senator and say, "Can you introduce this for us to borrow for this purpose?" Every single senator has a different way of evaluating a borrowing offering. Some of them will look at it strictly for, okay, who am I going to benefit by moving this forward? Others will look at it and say, okay, what's the return on investment? What's the timelines? What's the projected expectations? Others will look at it and say, okay, if they want to borrow for this purpose, I'd like for them also to address these other issues as well. How are we going to tie all those things together? And so what happens is when Gita approaches a senator and asks them to introduce a borrowing bill, they're narrowing it down to that one individual senator introducing this borrowing that's going to go before the entire legislature that we vote on. But that's kind of like where my question is coming from. How are we deciding how to move forward these kind of borrowing initiatives? What's the methodology? Because I remember when I first came in here, one of the things we brought up was bringing an economist on board into Gita. And do we currently have an economist?
We should. That's one of the things that we want to put in our next year's budget, is to hire an economist on the side. But yes, we use right now Gary from Department of Labor, in getting information. But currently, yeah, we don't have an actual economist that is employed with Guam Economic Development Authority.
Yeah, because I remember
and going back again to the needs again. Yes, you're right. I mean, when there's that need to pay for, like, let's say the lawsuit, the COLA lawsuit, I think that came from the legislature. The governor was okay with it, and then that's how we actually start the process. I think there were some, the tax refunds, of course, came from the governor's office into making sure the tax refunds are paid through that bond borrowing. There was also, I believe, the contributions for both for the retirement fund for both Guam Memorial Hospital and Guam Department of Education. That was also, there was some money that was borrowed to remit those contributions to the retirement fund. So yeah, the whether it starts with Gita needing some, or from the legislature because you guys need and request for us to look at and see if we can borrow. I think that's the process, and then we go through the process of, the credit reviews with the rating agencies, et cetera.
And that's kind of what concerns me, is that the borrowing has in large part, especially our largest borrowings, have been to offset financial mismanagements of the past, and so I want to make sure that, as we evaluate borrowing opportunities and considerations for investment, that we're not just borrowing to make up for or to catch up with stuff that was done in years prior. And so that's why I ask, how are we actually evaluating these things? Because not only should we be looking at it from a perspective of, okay, this is what it's going to solve, but we need to also evaluate the borrowing offering and saying, why weren't we able to pay for this with cash? Why did we avoid this obligation over all these years? And are we continuing to make those same mistakes?
Right.
And if we are continuing to make those same mistakes, you and I both know that you can't borrow your way out of a spending problem. So, that's why, I have these very direct questions, because I do believe that if you borrow and the cost of capital is lower than the return on investment, then it's a good thing to do. But I want to make sure that our current debt service, which is $87 million more or less right about now, which is double the budget for GPD, which is almost as much as we spend on public health. That's just debt service alone.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that we're not going to be increasing that amount going forward without us having a very firm handle on what we're borrowing for, what the return on investment is expected to be, and whether or not the cost of capital is less than what the actual return is anticipated to be, and also whether or not the borrowing is really for us to invest in our island or to make up for misspending habits that are not being addressed at their root. So those are just the kind of things I wanted to put out there in this discussion, because as a new chairman coming in, you have the opportunity to really have an eagle eye on those kind of things.
Right. And most rating agencies are like bankers. They're all analysts, and they look at it. And the last thing you want to see is a public entity borrow for operations. It really doesn't make sense. And like you mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that now we've actually corrected the problem. Now we're stable. So we want to make sure that all these tax refunds, all these things and operations are paid on a regular. But that's a BBMR ad, right?
Yeah. The other line of questioning, Mr. Chair, if you can indulge me, is just with respect to another concern that I've had, that I've kind of voiced, that I don't think has really gotten into the right ears or whatever. But I'm very concerned with what I'm viewing is a very high level of oversubscriptions in our bond offerings. Like, for example, with the Guam International Airport Authority bond, I think we borrowed about $200 million, and we were 7 times oversubscribed for that. In other words, for the amount that we wanted to seek from investors, we had 7 times the demand. And what that screams out to me is that we are probably pricing our offering a little too high, that everyone's jumping on board with it, and maybe we got to start pricing our offering more competitively so that we can be getting a lower interest rate on our 30-year bond. And when you're talking about 10 basis points on $200 million over the course of 30 years, that's a lot of money. And so...
what that tells me is that we have such a great rating that those investors want to purchase our bond.
That is one side of the equation. But with my investor hat on, the other side of the equation is we're not pricing ourselves competitively. We could be getting a much better pricing if we were more aggressive. And we were 7 times oversubscribed with the GIA bond. And I brought this up to GIA, and then 2 months later, we floated the Guam Waterworks Authority bond, and we were 12 times oversubscribed for that. 12 times as many borrowers, as many investors wanted to invest in that bond offering. And so I would like to also just kind of put this out there for you, that we really got to get those oversubscriptions down to a point where we're pricing our bond offering at a rate that's more competitive, so that we can be getting a better balance between the number of subscribers and the interest rate that we're willing to pay. Because the reality, John, is one thing is the rating agency saying, yeah, our rating is higher. That will attract more investors. But another thing is the interest rate. And if we price our offering at 10%, we're going to get 120 oversubscriptions. But the science, and this is where GITA needs to really step up and be a fiduciary for our people, is that the science is in balancing the demand with what we need to pay in order to meet our goal of floating that bond. And for us to be 7 times oversubscribed, it does say, yes, we do have a good rating, but it also means that we are pricing our interest rate a little too high, and we need to try and squeeze it down a little bit lower. And,
well, when we did the tax refund bonds, I believe it was like 4-point-some%, which is one of the lowest that it's ever, that we've ever floated a bond. So, I mean, those rates were low. Now, not saying that we can't go to 2-3%,
exactly.
Right? Is that
the
what
lower
you're saying?
we can go, the better.
Yeah.
I mean, especially because we're triple tax exempt. I mean, when you're triple tax exempt, there's very few other entities throughout the U.S. that can offer that, and so the demand for that is very, very special, because there are certain types of investors who are attracted to that. So I'd just like to put those two things out there, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator McCready?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Rios. Good afternoon. I have a 2:45 to go to, but I thought it was very important to come here and support your nomination. I think you're very qualified for the job, and I congratulate you for your success and your willingness to lead this agency forward. I think you'll make a fine administrator. I was looking at this packet, and I only had one question before this, but I just want to ask this question first, and I'll go to my second question, Mr. Chair. Can you explain on, I think it's page 3, on the last, after the hot bond program?
Oh, is that?
I believe it's page. It's the second. It's the change
Senator,
order notes.
Do you think we can? We'll hold that off for the informational.
Oh, okay.
Right after.
Okay.
Just this
I can't stay for
appointment.
the informational. That's why I wanted to ask my question.
Okay.
But maybe.
But go ahead. If you could, then you can
I
state
just
it,
wanna-
and then we can have them answer it after.
Okay. I just, if you could explain the change orders in the Chamorro, the Guam and Chamorro Educational Facility.
If I can bring up the experts.
Maybe we can. I'm just asking it for the record, and
Yes,
then
and
I
then
have
we'll
to
have
leave.
the record.
And these were prior change
Yes,
orders that were,
sure.
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just,
Okay.
so that was my question. That was my second question. But my first question was, when you take over this agency and you lead us through financial responsibility or fiscal responsibility as well, we are getting out of a federal receivership and closing the audit dump. And we're just about ready to get into another one with the Department of Corrections. Can you just, for the record, state your position on what kind of economic impact another federal receivership would have on our government in general and our general fund?
Yeah. Well, again, putting my budget hat back on, you'll see the problems that we are having currently with the receiver for the dump, from not remitting the amounts for the debt service, as well as expenditures that, of course, were questionable. But that, again, I'd rather not really get into detail because of it being with the district court. But if we were to do that again, then we would just basically lose control. That's what happens when you go in receivership. You start losing control, then you have somebody taking over for you.
But would you be inclined to state that something needs to be done almost immediately when it deals with the infrastructure problems?
Yeah. And that, of course, I leave to the department themselves. I mean, they know they know the facility more, they know the operations there more, and I leave it up to them to make that determination. But yeah, I mean, I believe the facility is really, has outgrown. I mean, I'm trying to remember that those numbers.
280% overcrowded, yes.
Yeah, 280% overcrowded, so.
The reason why I asked the question is because at some point in time, GITA is going to be probably responsible for facilitating a lease back option, and I wanted to get your opinion on what a federal receivership would mean to our government and our island. So I thank you. I thank you for answering that question. You have my full support, sir.
Okay.
I want to wish you the best, and you're very accessible to us when we need you, and I thank you for committing yourself to us when no one's watching. That's what I said yesterday about Mr. Blas, and you are one of those guys that are behind the scenes and very helpful in leading the financial stake of this government the right way. So I thank you very
Senator.
much.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you, Senator. And we'll make sure that's
Thank you for
answered.
answering.
Okay.
Letting me answer.
Senator Yamashita.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Welcome.
Hi, thank
Congratulations.
you.
And thank you for your willingness. John, can you list for us the members of the GITA board?
I'm
Who's
sorry?
on your board? Who's on your GITA board?
There's E.J. Calvo, who's the chairman, David John, there's George Chui, there's Vera Wu, Monty Mesa, and, okay, I know there's a couple more. There's Mr. Espaldon. I forgot his first name. Yeah, June Espaldon.
So you have a full complement of board members.
Yes, we do.
Okay. And
I think we had, we have one opening, I
One
believe.
opening.
Yeah, just recently, Miss Berdalio resigned.
Arlene.
Yeah.
Arlene
Yes,
Berdalio.
yes.
Okay. But for the most part, you have a full complement.
Mhm.
These folks represent expertise
Mhm.
in the finance world, in the economy. They have owned businesses. They've served government agencies. And so in my mind, they present overall and visionary guidance for GITA. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. And when I heard that you were going to GITA, what I thought was, in the work that I've done with GITA in the last 3 years, I believe that GITA is filled with such high levels of innovative and enthusiastic intelligence that in a variety of ways is really helping this island move forward, and I really appreciate that. And we go from the farmers co-op to the fishers co-op to even on the sidelines and trying to help us understand transit and how to incentivize that whole issue. Repeatedly, your agency, your team members bring invaluable knowledge, a sense of hope, and an excitement about where to go. And I thought about you being this administrator, because it'll take a certain type of person to be able to allow them to rock and roll and to allow them just to soar. I have a statement that comes to mind. My dad used to say, when there's something really good going on, you just throw more gas on it and just let it go, right? And so how do you feel about coming into an agency where there's just such a high level of expertise?
Well, I'm lucky. I'm very lucky to have those individuals. But I think a lot of our agencies possess individuals like that, whether they're experts in finance, in accounting, at Department of Administration, budget, BBMR. I mean, a lot of them, I saw that at BBMR and also in GITA. So I know a lot of agencies have those, So I think, as long as we're able to keep to keep them happy and enjoy their work environment, I think that's really important.
Yeah.
We can't satisfy, them all the time.
Correct.
But as long as we're able to, work with them and make them understand, like if my answer was no, let them understand why it is no, and then my personal opinion is that they would respect me for something like that.
Yeah. So again, I just think it's a good fit.
Okay.
Your knowledge base, your expertise, your experience in both private and public, and then your ability, your confidence, your self-confidence will allow you to let them work, and to so that there's no power issue and stuff. And so I'm very pleased that this change is happening. So I wish you the best of luck, and I look forward to working with you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really have no choice. You're my father-in-law's neighbor. No, John, you've been a great neighbor to my father-in-law. He knew you way before me, and he has a lot of great things to say about you. So
Every morning I see you.
yeah. But aside from that, I want to thank you for your years of public service and giving back to this community through your expertise. I also want to acknowledge, like I did with Senator Blas yesterday, that your contributions to the fiscal team, and I'm sure you'll probably still be playing a role in that really great team that has been assembled to help guide our government with its finances. Since you're going up there, I asked this question many times about, we're looking at the data. I mentioned it before to you when I was at BSP, serving there, and looking at the census data and looking at that. I don't believe that there is a significant increase in population on Guam, but I believe there's a significant shift in population, seeing folks moving from the south, central north, or north to central. But my point is when we're analyzing this data and you're seeing that, I know a lot of this is a cost of living issue. A lot of them are wanting to be closer to work, closer to the schools. I bring this up because you're at GITA now, and I'm sure you're going to look at opportunities that expand far greater than outside of not only Tumon, but in the southern communities that will keep these families in their communities. What is your vision? I'm sure we have the governor's vision, we have the mission and GITA to follow, but I just want to see if opportunities are being explored for the southern communities, and looking at plans or some feasibility down there. What opportunities can present itself to keep these families in their homes down there, keep them in their communities down there. There is a major shift of population going on, and I'm hoping that we can see some plans come out of GITA of your tenure there, and if you can present something to us. I'm not sure. I know you guys got there, but I know we have hot bonds going on. We have these things, but I'm saying economic opportunities that can present itself down there.
Yes, and it's not. I know we rely a lot on tourism, but there's other markets that can be explored and we can increase, such as agriculture. I mean, if you think down south, the soil down there. Excuse me, I have a ranch down there, so I know the soil down there is really good. That's one. There's also transportation, maybe another market that we can. So that's one of the things that I'd like to, is not rely totally on just tourism. I mean, I know tourism, we get a lot of money from tourism. We're diversifying our tourist base, so now I believe Japanese tourists are a lot lower now. There's more, but other markets. I mean, if we look at other markets, it would help the island,
right?
And that's my opinion on it.
Oh, it's good to hear. I look forward to working with you. I worked great with you, and again, if those opportunities present themselves, I'd like to be involved and see how this legislature can help facilitate some of those opportunities down in the southern communities. So again, it's key to looking at that data, and you're seeing that there is a shift going on, and we have to pay close attention to that. And it all falls back to a cost of living issue. And if you talk to many of these families down there, that's really what's going on right now.
Yes,
and that's why we see crowdings in the central and the north. It's that shift going on. If you look at the data, the projections were 180,000 to 200,000 in population, but the count came in at 160. But we're still seeing a perception of overcrowding. But that's because it's just a shift going on. That's what I believe is happening. If we're not at the 180,000 or 200,000 population count. But thank you so much. You have my full support. Again, thank you for all your service to this community, and I look forward to your confirmation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Ada, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, John, I just have one question. Your predecessor attempted to pass through the waste-to-energy contract down here for legislative action. And I guess GIDA had entered into a closed room negotiation with the GRRP. It got sent down here without the board's input or any kind of imprimatur from the board. So my first question is that issue on your table?
No, it isn't. The board did acknowledge that they were aware of the agreement, and that was something that the courts had asked both GRRP and GIDA is to sit down and agree to something. And I believe we provided that agreement that was signed both by GIDA board chair Mr. Mesa,
which was
as well
basically
as
the same agreement as what it was about 15 years ago.
I think it was a little different. I'm really, anyways, yeah.
The bottom line is that an issue that's on your table to try and bring down to the legislature?
I think it's with GRP needing the bill to be introduced first to allow for something like that, and then from there, it's and I'd rather, I'm sorry, but I'd rather have our legal counsel, because I know it's still not final. It's still not done yet. It's still the agreement was done. It was signed, but it's still in court.
Okay.
So
well, then, putting aside, be it the waste to energy contract or any other similar instrument, do you feel that something like that, before it gets out of GIDA, should have had at least a resolution from the board attached to it, saying that yes, they fully stand behind that agreement that was entered into?
No, because the representation was already signed by the board member and agreed on with the minutes from the board that they're all aware about the agreement.
No.
So they are aware now. Now they don't sign they would not sign the contract.
That's right.
Because it would be the government of Guam to enter into a contract with GRRP.
Well, what came down here, there was no documentation indicating that the board had even given any kind of a nod to the contract, which is my point, in that, regardless of whatever contract it might be, or something similar of this nature, is that something that you would have unilaterally taken out of GIDA down to the legislature to try and get it run through, or do you feel that something like that should have been accompanied by a board resolution?
Let me
because the documentation that came down here did not have any board
was a letter from
fingerprints on it at all.
It was just the letter, right, and then the copy of the contract.
That's right.
That was discussed, and then also during the hearing, the agreement between the board and the board, Mr. Mesa signing it, and GRRP was also submitted, right?
No. No. The only thing
I thought it was.
The only thing that had a GIDA fingerprint on it was the letter that that was from your predecessor.
Okay.
And in fact, I believe even that copy did not have his signature, but it was on his letterhead.
Okay.
But
I can check on
guess
that.
I'm kind of assured that, as far as you're concerned, that's not on your table to take.
But no, let me follow up and see what was already submitted, if anything, because I thought the agreement, what was discussed during that hearing, informational hearing, was that they were to provide a copy of the agreement, and I thought they did provide. but let me confirm that if I
They
give me
did, and
time.
then the governor came out the next day in the paper and says he would never support anything like that.
Okay.
That was in the agreement.
Mhm.
So it was
Okay.
just seemed
This
like
is the one
left
with the
hand.
Gita, and yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me confirm.
Yeah, it just seemed like the left hand didn't know what the
Mhm.
right hand was doing.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ada. And just to touch up a little about that, just to make it clear, what Gita did provide at that time was just the agreement which Senator Ada had referenced, that this was the same agreement. Was it 15 years ago? The same agreement. And so what we've been asking, which we haven't gotten to this point, is a board resolution saying that they acknowledge this agreement. They went through mediation, and that Gita supports. This is the best interest of the people of Guam, and Gita supports. And now legislature, it's for you to decide whether this is a policy decision to move forward or not. I know that they what Gita had provided was minutes. I believe minutes of the meeting where it was discussed, but that still does not satisfy what this body requires, which is a board resolution saying this is something we looked at and it's the best interest of the people of Guam. So that's what we don't have.
Okay.
Okay. So we can set that for another time, but. Is there any other questions, comments? If not, I want to congratulate you on your appointment, and we'll prepare your committee report and report it out for the next session, which is, I believe, later this month. Okay? Thank you very much. So this concludes the public hearing, confirmation hearing on Mr. Rios. We'll keep the record open for a few more days to allow any written testimonies to be submitted. Now we'll move over to the next item on the agenda, the informational hearing on the Guam Economic Development Authority relative to the status of the Hotel Occupancy Tax hot bond project. So if you want to please come forward. Anyone else too that wishes to, you can come forward. Mr. Cruz or Mr. Diego? Good? Okay. Okay, we're here now. We had a hearing on this last month on the status of the hot bond projects. And there was presentation that was done by Gita listing out all the different projects that are ongoing, the challenges that each project is facing. And before, I know you have a prepared statement to perhaps read into the record. There was a specific question that I sent Gita through the. Can we turn one off? This is if it's on. Is it? Sorry, sometimes it does that when. Okay. Okay, so we had I provided specific questions as a follow-up, and so if that is part of your testimony, then we'll accept it then. If not, then we can just go over it after you do your opening, right? And if you can just, Mr. Rios, introduce your team who's with you.
Okay, I have myself, and you guys want to... I have to the right Diego, and Mike, I'm sorry, Mike Cruz. And then what's your name again? And Larry Tovis, I'm sorry. Okay, and if I may, I can go ahead and read this from the acting administrator. Dear Senator Rodriguez, Hafaday, the Guam Economic Development Authority attended a legislative informational hearing on August 7, 2014. At the conclusion of that hearing, additional information and/or clarification was requested by certain senators regarding projects supported by Hotel Occupancy Tax bonds. As you know, these projects are known colloquially as hot bond projects. These inquiries focus mainly on the Guam and Chamorro Educational Facility construction, the Tumon Bay Flood Mitigation Project, and work of the program manager and construction manager. Gita believes the following information is responsive to legislative inquiry. Under the GCEF, as previously reported by Gita, and after some period of delay regarding certain tasks on the project's critical path, construction has resumed on the foundation and concrete is now being poured. The restriking test analysis confirmed an embedded friction piles would support the facility's superstructure. The method to analyze these piles was identified by the contractor and agreed to by Gita. In addition to pile restriking, several change orders were submitted to Gita, which may extend the expected date of completion. Requests for extension of time to complete work are made pursuant to contract and subject to Gita's approval. At this time, it is premature to report the cost of delays for the GCEF. As a preliminary matter, the contractual time for completion has not yet passed, to delay is, at this time, conjectural. Additionally, and with regard to project budget, Gita and its contractor are meeting to review construction schedules and deliverables for the purpose of value engineering. This means that the parties are currently assessing certain options for the museum to recover any anticipated costs in excess of the original budget. To date, 6 change orders to the construction contract have been approved. These resulted in increased costs of $406,137.55, of which $371,176.27 are related to the friction piles. Please be aware that Gita abides by all contract terms and insists its contractor do the same. Where additional cost is due to any contractor's error, omissions, actions, or failure to act, Gita will exercise all rights to recover and does not waive the same. Additionally, in the event the contractor fails to complete the construction of the GCEF, its surety will take over and complete the contract under the performance bond. Finally, inquiry was made concerning the operational budget for the GCEF. Gita will not oversee the operation of the facility once construction is completed. This function is co-signed to the Department of Chamorro Affairs. Gita has not been informed of that department's budget allocation for the operation of the facility and invites your committee to make inquiry with the competent agency. Tumon Bay Flood Mitigation Project. As you know, a consultant was engaged to explore solutions to mitigate flooding along San Vitores Road in Tumon. Gita is informed that the project area was inspected and evaluated, problem areas defined, and a stormwater model was developed to analyze flooding and assist in development of proposed improvements. Multiple alternatives were proposed to Gita, and Gita ultimately approved the Gravity Bay Outlet alternative as an effective means to mitigate flooding. Consultants will now proceed to the next phase of the project, which is to design for the Gravity Bay Outlet. A member of your committee asked whether any party other than Guam has a possessory interest in the real property affected by the mitigation project. Gita is currently conducting an investigation and will provide any results. Program Management Office and Construction Management roles. The Program Manager and Construction Manager are necessary parties to the hot bond projects and ensure progress to completion within the available and allocated funding. Rather than glossing glossing over contractual duties assumed by either the program or construction manager, GITA believes it's best to let the contracts speak for themselves. We have enclosed the respective contracts for your review, si Juus Maase for your inquiry, and more importantly, your support of GITA in our continuing effort to complete these important projects. Sinceramente, Mana Silva Tyron, Acting Administrator.
You have another presentation as well on the specifics? Or maybe before we go to that, we'll ask if there's any questions from the panel. Senator Barnes, thank you for joining. Senator Adat, you have a question?
I guess basically to sum up the testimony, Mr. Rios, the questions focused on the issue of cost overruns at the museum, and on and with respect to that, I guess in your testimony, it's basically work. It's work in progress. So you have not reached any conclusions as to where you're going to need to cut. Where you're going to need to cut to cover for the cost overruns incurred so far. In addition to the fact that really for a project like this, at least in my discussion with one of the engineering professionals, that for a project like this, there really should have been set aside of about 15% of construction costs for contingencies, cost overruns and whatnot, of which my understanding from the last briefing was that, the budget was tight. It was like, this is how much it costs for construction, and there's nothing for contingencies. So as you continue, with the work in progress to do the value engineering, I hope that that's taken into consideration, that you really need to program in your contingency for cost overruns, which will inevitably, I guarantee you, inevitably will happen.
And also, and in most bids and proposals, most contractors above their, in addition to their profit margin that they increase their proposal or their bid, usually also includes contingency, a 10 or 15% contingency, just in case of any overrun to the construction costs, etc.
Due to their oversight.
Here, because we're the customers.
Yeah.
We're Gov Guam. We're the customers here. The contractor is the one that submitted to their proposal. But yes, you're right. To their to any of their overruns.
For their oversight, but
Yeah.
but obviously the fact that they had to do almost $500,000 more work to verify the pilings, the integrity of the pilings, was certainly something that I'm sure So anyway, leave it as it may, leave it as it is. It's your response basically to the questions that were posed is that it's still work in progress, and you guys haven't really reached any conclusions. Now, the similar thing on the Tumon Bay flood mitigation project. The response basically is that GITA is currently conducting an investigation and will provide any results. I'm just kind of surprised that how long, I guess it's been 3-4 weeks since the last hearing, and 3-4 weeks later, still haven't been able to find anything if that is in fact Gov Guam property or private property.
Good afternoon, everybody. Half day. My name is Larry Toves. I'm manager of the Real Property Division, having oversight over the hot pond projects. And so in answer to your question, Senator, in fact, that was about 3 weeks ago when that question was asked. Since then, we've tried to work with the appropriate agencies to get clarification on ownership of the property, not just with the ponding basin, but all the adjacent properties. And so it's taken some time to try to get a response back, but in the meantime, we went ahead and GITA commissioned PTRs for these properties. And so this morning, I got the last of 4 PTRs, and we're still reviewing those.
I'm sorry.
Property title reports.
Okay.
It basically confirms the title, where the property, or who it belongs to at this point. So with that, we
again, I just got the last of 4 this morning. I will tell you that all indications thus far that in just our cursory review of the PTRs indicate that the existing ponding basin is or does belong to the government of Guam. The adjacent properties to it, though, we understand are still privately owned. So once we've confirmed all the PTRs and confirmation from the regulatory agencies, we intend to meet with the private owners of any, adjacent properties. If the intent here is to expand the existing ponding basin, then of course we'd have to get permission based on what we have in front of us thus far. So all the documents that have been provided indicate that, particularly with the gallery is what it's called, the immediately adjacent property to the ponding basin, where one of the options was to expand into it, is actually private property, but we do have to get permission from the owner. So once we get all this information together and confirmed, we will then proceed to either have discussions with the private owners, or we can elect not to expand the existing ponding basin and possibly stick to one of the alternatives is to just do the bay outlet, which is just installation of some underground pipes from the current ponding basin out to the bay. And so that line, if you will run across on government property, government easement, out to the bay. So there's a possibility we may not have to expand.
Okay. On that particular project, I noticed on this spreadsheet that you gave, it shows here, it gives a date of design is to be completed February 2015. So actually, is the design currently in progress?
That is correct. We just had the amendment to the contract for our designer completed a couple weeks ago. So it's in progress now.
Okay. All right, fine. And finally, the response to the question of what is the role of the program management office and the role of the construction manager, and I'm kind of actually I don't know how to describe my reaction to the response here, but the response was, Gita believes it's best to let the contracts speak for themselves. Come on, guys. I think conceptually we all know that the program manager, if I'm correct, without having to take the time to read through the contracts, but the program manager is that guy that's contracted to basically oversee the various subcontractors that are involved in this project. And so he's the go-to guy.
Correct.
And the construction manager, I guess in this case, for the construction of the museum facility itself, the structure, that we hire a construction manager to make sure that he is in fact following the engineering designs. Now, if you agree with that, why couldn't you guys have just said that as opposed to saying Gita believes it's best to let the contracts? In other words, the response here is saying go read the contract yourself and figure it out. But conceptually, I think what I described is probably pretty accurate, unless somebody wants to dispute that.
Senator, there's no dispute about what you've just described. I believe that's the intent. I'm not sure, though, with the question that was raised at the last hearing. I'm sorry I wasn't here, but my understanding of that was they wanted clarification of each responsibility of each, whether it be the PMO or the CM. And so rather than going through the contract and I guess, lack of a better word, maybe just describing each responsibility, we would provide you the contract itself, and the legislature can look at it. But if you want us to break it down in that fashion, we can do that.
No, I really don't want that. And, quite frankly, the place you could have gone to find the answer was simply go to the scope of work on the RFP or the IFB. and we would have found in there in a couple of paragraphs what the scope of work is of your PMO or your construction manager. I don't question the competence of GIDA and the personnel that work there, but when I see an answer like this, you're kind of like, come on guys, humor me. So I'll just leave it at that, and as long as, if you think that how I described it is pretty accurate, then let the record show that that's basically then really in answer to that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Barnes, did you have any questions?
No, I just wanted to add on that based on Senator Atta's comments, that the delineation of the scope of work would have identified that, and it would have been really simple to put down, Larry, and sometimes that's all it takes is a little extra time to do the separation.
Sure.
Just food for thought.
Duly noted.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Senator Nicholas, and then we'll go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, guys. Thanks again for coming. My first question that I wanted to ask, because I have the hot bond here in front of me, is the issue amount was for $90,665,000. I know GIDA gets a fee for floating the bond. Can you guys share with me what that fee was that GIDA received for this $90 million offering?
There's a fee. We understand that there's a fee for selling the bond, but yeah, we can get that information for you, Senator. That was handled by our Public Finance Division, but I will attempt to get that exact amount.
Do we have an estimate, though? I mean, I'm sure there's a standard floor almost on the fee that GIDA gets a certain percentage of each offering.
Isn't that fee set by law 2%?
Sort of. If my recollection, I vaguely remember reading the bond indentures, but I believe it was around that figure, 2 to 3%.
Okay, so we have this bond that we floated for $90 million and a 2% fee that was already paid to GIDA for the floating of that bond, which comes up to about $1.8 million. $1.8 million. And what I'm going to go through here is an exercise of how much this is total costing the people of Guam, because there's some things in here that I kind of wanted to just bring to your attention so that I can feel more comfortable with how things have been progressing here. But we have $1.8 million of the total bond offering that was included in the financing to pay for, to go to GIDA as a fee. Now that $1.8 million does not include the interest expense of the cost of financing that fee in the borrowing. So we have $1.8 million times the borrowing interest cost of 6.52%. So times 0.0652, that's $117,000 a year in interest expense that this $1.8 million is going to generate, and you multiply that by 30 years, which is approximately the life of the bond, and that's $3,520,800 in interest expense alone that the people of Guam are going to have to pay for this fee that GIDA collected. Okay, so we add the interest expense of $3.52 million plus the $1,800,000, and the true cost for GIDA's fee of $1.8 million when you add in the interest expense is $5,320,800. So the people of Guam are basically paying almost 5% of the total issue amount in cost plus interest expense for the GIDA fee of $1.8 million. So just for floating the bond, the people of Guam paid out $1.8 million plus $3,500,000 in interest expense. And I bring this up because another expense is built into this project that's going to GIDA again. And this is where I'm kind of getting concerned, because GIDA is collecting another $434,000 in cost for professional services. Under every single project here, I see a GIDA fee for professional services. And when you add it all up, it comes out to $434,000. And that's just in the cost, but that's all being paid out of the bond proceeds. Mm-hmm. So when you add in the interest expense, that comes out to another $807,000. And when you add the two together, that's $1,241,240 that it's going to cost the people of Guam, all going to pay for GIDA floating the bond and providing professional services to the project. And when you add all of that together, guys, it comes out to $5,320,800 for the floating of the bond, plus $1,241,240 for these administrative fees, these professional service fees that GITA is getting paid. And altogether, the total cost for whatever is getting paid to GITA for this project is $6,561,040. $6.5 million in cost plus interest expense going to pay for GITA floating the bond and administering the project. Now this is kind of, and I wanted to bring this up because that's a lot of money. When you look at it and you just break it all down to the dollars without the interest expense, GITA got paid $2.2 million. For floating this bond, GITA got paid $2.2 million for floating the bond and providing professional services for the project. When you add in all the interest expenses, it comes out to that $6 million figure. And see, that's where I kind of go back to my questions to Mr. Rios was, is there ever a borrowing that GITA doesn't like? Because GITA is not only collecting fees from issuing the borrowing, they're also collecting fees from whatever administrative services they're providing to the borrowing. And while I understand that everybody, we need to pay for these kind of things to take place, we still need to be mindful of the total dollars that all these things are costing. And so like when I see $434,000 that GITA is charging for professional services, I sit back and I ask myself, we paid you guys $1.8 million already to float the bond. Do we really need to spend another $400,000 and then tack on $800,000 of interest on top of that for you guys to provide the services we need to just see those projects to completion? You know what I'm saying? And so these are the kind of questions that I ask because I really think that we need to be doing some self-reflection, not just GITA, but throughout the government, doing some self-reflection and asking ourselves, are we really putting value out there for our people, or is it something that we've just become so accustomed to that we have never really looked at it a second time or a third time? And I'd like for us to probably take these second or third looks, because when I look at it for the first time, I sit back and I say, $1.8 million was a pretty good amount to pay already, and to add $400,000 on top of that, and to know that all of this is getting charged an interest expense, it just kind of, it makes me step back and do a gut check, And so I kind of wanted to just bring that up and ask you guys maybe what you thought, or at least in bringing it up, maybe have GITA reconsider future deals as they go forward and really evaluate not just the cost of the services GITA might need to provide, but take into consideration the interest expense and how all of that adds up to millions and millions of dollars for our people, just for GITA's portion alone.
Understand, Senator, and your concerns are valid, but at this point I must apologize. Neither myself or my staff here are able to answer specifically the questions regarding the floating of the bonds. That's an entirely different division, but as much as I'm saying that, I should have been more prepared to provide that information today. However, I will go back to our Public Finance Division, confirm the $1.8 million that you've come up with, and the numbers that you've just illustrated. I am only aware of the $430,000 for GITA's fees at this point as part of the drawdown from the entire budget. But I will go back and get with our Public Finance Division, and we'll get some confirmation on the numbers of what was actually provided or spent using the proceeds of the hot bonds for either the underwriters, the floating of the bonds, whatever services were provided in that process. We can actually provide the numbers to you.
Where I'm going with this, guys, is I don't want to get to the point where I'm questioning every single expense item and saying, do we need this? Do we not need this? Why are we paying this much for that? What I would like to just do at this point is just raise the awareness right now so that GITA going forward, and I'm glad that the director, the most likely incoming administrator is here, looking forward, can you guys just have that more critical eye when you look at these projects and really ask yourselves, can we start whittling down these overall costs? Because for me, this is just that's a little high. And I fully support the GITA mission, but I really believe, and this is something that I've stated on the record before, is that I believe GITA, every single employee of GITA is a fiduciary of the people's money. Your responsibility, aside from administering projects or managing real property or floating bonds, overall your responsibility is to serve as, you're almost like the investment advisor of the people of Guam. And I was an investment advisor in the private sector when I came from there. And we on the private side, we have fiduciary hats that we have to wear, and if we don't meet those fiduciary obligations, we can be in a lot of trouble. We can get sued and everything. And I know that GITA does not have any direct fiduciary definition, but I really believe the function of GITA is very fiduciary, because you guys are borrowing, you guys are investing, you guys are moving forward projects for our people. And I would like the fiduciary aspect to be exercised a little bit more prudently in terms of evaluating the overall cost of the services GITA provides, factoring in the interest expense, and really asking, are these the highest and best uses of the money that the people are going to have to pay back? Because it's all being paid back by our tax dollars. I really appreciate you guys being here, and thank you very much for answering my question.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Barnes, did you just have?
Mr. Chair, for giving me the time to answer this question. As I was looking over the letter that was provided regarding the contracts that's still under legal counsel's review, one that's come to mind as I'm wearing another hat for the government as the finance chair for the Festival of the Arts for 2016, there was a provision based on 30-228 that would give the set aside to the Department of Chamorro Affairs, which is our CAHA, who is the lead agency that will host the Festival of the Arts here in Guam in May of 2016. The MOU with the Department of Chamorro Affairs and GITA for the 1% set aside for the arts. First of all, that should have been solidified, and what's the status of that? And I'm going to tell you in advance that I'm probably going to do a follow-up letter to ask for all the programs, the other programs that are going on, and where we're at that, and as far as collection, because I know that CAHA was supposed to be a check for before the official occupancy permit is submitted. So how far are we on this? If this is still not negotiated, when I know it's been several years already.
Senator, yes, in fact, we have been negotiating. We had negotiated that with CAHA, DCA, and all the parties involved. Unfortunately, the actual, I guess it's an amendment to our current budget, has been going back and forth between GITA, DCA, and the Attorney General's office. So as of today, that particular instrument is still being reviewed by the Attorney General. So there have been some changes made over the last couple of months with the agreement.
Are you familiar with the changes, or?
Of one particular instance, I understand that there was a need to provide for certification of funds from CAHA or DCA, and so we had to retract the agreement, get the signatures for that, and get the certification of funds. There were a couple of other issues that came about. I guess my understanding is it's going through different review processes, and so everybody has a take on it, but this latest one, I was told, was being reviewed by Assistant Attorney General, and that so far there have been no concerns raised, but it's just a matter of...
So when do you think the actual submission back to GITA would be finalized from the Attorney General's office? What timeline are we looking at?
Senator, quite honestly, I could give you a date, but I'm not sure if it's actually going to happen, but I would guess maybe by the end of this month, if not sooner.
Okay, so in fair shake to the acting director, I will submit my letter as the chair of the Finance Committee for the Festival of the Arts to you with an update and asking where CAHA's point is, and as far as checking off for final occupancy, and if they're a part of that. Okay.
I just want to make one clarification,
yes.
though. Our understanding is this is strictly for the 1% of arts law.
Yes.
That was
Yes,
passed.
this is what I'm talking about.
Okay, right.
Yes, which plays a part of that.
Okay.
Because
all right.
the agency lead is CAHA, Department of Chamorro Affairs,
Right.
CAHA.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. Senator Yamashita? Senator Morrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some of these projects here, you know, it's obvious we see a lot of the village signs going up, right, and it's looking nice out there. Has there been any contentions with any of the mayors with regards to where the located signs are at?
Actually, Senator, when we were doing the actual scope of work, when it was being drafted, and even after it was drafted, our PMO, met with each of the village mayors, and they had input on the design, the location of these signs, these village signs. There are a total of 19 village monument signs.
Okay, that's good to know, because I think for once and for all, we're now truly defining with actual landmarks where these boundaries are, because my house is not normally the entrance of Umatic anymore, so that's good to know. But I see now there's been contention in the past where actual entrances and exits are for some of these village are, but
to confirm your question, yes, the mayors were the ones who decided where these signs went.
And this was based on land management's mapping as well.
Land management was involved.
Right.
Department of Public Works as far as easements and so on.
Okay. I know these projects are moving along great, and I'm not sure if there's room for added suggestions, but I just want to throw this out there. GPD was here the other day, and I know this is the hot bounds, and of course it goes back to our bread and butter who basically pay these occupancy taxes, which is our tourists that come here, and this is what's basically we're leveraging on to fund all these projects. And I bring that up, and I reference GPD because there has been shortage of manpower getting around to every area. And we know Tumon is the heart of our industry, tourism industry, and I'm throwing this suggestion out there. If there is any opportunity to work with GPD and potentially looking at surveilling the area completely throughout Tumon. They brought it up a couple of times, but I'm not sure. I just don't want the discussion to die. But we need to, if we can get an officer roaming throughout the communities, at least with the heart of our industry, our tourism industry, that they should at least know that we have to secure our visitors down there. Much more if we can't have an officer roaming around constantly. It's a suggestion. They like the idea. Of course, I'm just wondering, if it was an idea ever brought to participate in this hot bun projects as far as surveilling it through surveillance cameras every 50 or 100 feet for tourism, and be monitored by E911 or GPD. But I'm just concerned that if this is where we know it's coming from, that we should go back. Also, it's great to see a lot of the landscape and the facilities throughout the island getting refurbished, repaired. It's nice. That's great. But we need to maybe look at another aspect, which is the protection of these our investment, or those folks who come here, our visitors. So. If there's room with these projects, I asked if that could be a discussion taken with GPD. If not, at least you can have it duly noted and look for opportunities for to protect this investment down there. These tourists are getting hit, pretty much down there, and we do have so much officers we can put down there, but we still need to cover the other island. But I think surveilling the Tumon district, at least to start with, would be a great investment to protecting the investment that we know is sensitive right now with what's happening down there with them getting robbed. But I throw that out there. I want to keep the discussion alive. We brought it up last time. I'm sure that's something that DITA could probably look into. And if there can be any recommendations, it can come back to this committee in partnership with GPD or E911 and see how that could work down there. Other than that, thank you guys for presenting this. I know a lot of these projects are ongoing, and I know that it's good to hear that the mayors were involved with those signs, and it's clear indication that we now are seeing where these actual boundaries are for our communities. Is there going to be a kind of a follow-up of what's kind of the balance that will be left with regards, or these are kind of all spoken for, the hot bond?
I would venture to say, Senator, at some point in time when we start to see these projects come to completion, if there are any funds left over and available through the hot bond proceeds, we would actually have to come back to the legislature and to present to you that those findings, if anything. But we'll work directly with, when I say will, my staff and I will work with our incoming administrator and deputy administrator to address those issues as they come before us. But as we've reported every month, we'll give you these updates as far as the project, and the cost and the budgets and the timeline, so that you're constantly being made aware of where we're at with the projects and if there's any savings that we're going to anticipate.
Mr. Chair, I hope we could keep this discussion going with regards to surveillance using potential of this bond if there's a balance. And if you could note that, I know the chairwoman is here as well for DVB. I think it's well justified that this could be a great investment or potential project that I know GPD has presented to some opportunities like that, but I think it's something worth looking to talking with the department and the chief, please. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Morrison. I just have two things. One of them is the Hagåtña pool. I know the last time we were here, there was discussion about some challenges with the Hagåtña pool. My biggest concern was that access for individuals with disability. Right now as it is, you can't get them in and out of the pool, right? I know at some point they were using this lift that they get from the Dededo pool that they bring over. Is there any, I know the last time your, I don't know who I forget his name, from the PMO?
Mr. Gavin Thomas.
Yes, he was mentioning about that they were looking into that and seeing what options may be available now. Has there been any progress on that specific project?
Currently, from the last report, we've commissioned our PMO or directed them to actually do a full assessment of the Hagåtña pool. As we were going through developing the scope, and we just had our last inspection at the pool site a couple weeks ago, there's a lot of work that needs to be done for the pool. We can do some Band-Aid fixes at this point with the money that was budgeted for it, but all in all, the analysis at this point is that it's not enough money to handle everything. The ADA compliance is an issue. We've actually added that into our initial scope, if I'm not mistaken, to address that. So after we get this pool analysis to determine exactly how much it's going to cost to fix the pool and keep it running as it should, and in compliance with whatever regulatory requirements, we can then work within GITA, get our board's approval, and whoever we need to try to see if we can actually fix that pool, and not just give it Band-Aid fixes at this point.
Sure. Okay. I have every confidence that you guys will do the work, that aspect, do the assessments, right? But do we have a time frame of when this assessment that is happening now, and what the course of action would be?
I understand that it's 6 weeks to complete the study. So we actually gave the notice to proceed on this project. It was, I believe, just last week. So we have another 5 more weeks.
Okay. Okay. So we'll wait for that. And then the other thing is just to share my concern is the San Vitor's flooding, right? Mm-hmm. The project for that for the flood mitigation, the budgeted amount 11.5 million. But clearly, what we discussed over the last hearing, that there was other options, right, that really cost a lot more.
Right.
And so now that we're still not, is the design done for that or not yet?
It's
right?
in progress.
It's in progress.
Right.
Okay. So I guess just my concern, I wanted to state for the record, is that number one, the ownership issue, the property, And number two is that whatever we do now, whether it is going to be an expensive Band-Aid fix, or if it's something that really looks at sustainability for long term, right? I know that it went as high as maybe 35 million. That was something that was discussed, and obviously we don't have that, but that's just something I think we really need to think about and discuss now prior to even, breaking ground to do work there. So if we can just continue to get these updates, I think it'll be helpful for everyone involved. Okay, great. Thank you, Senator. You had something else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to apologize for not being earlier on the hearing for the confirmation of John Rios, and if I could just add for the record that I have known Mr. Rios for more than 35 years and working even in the 3 previous administrations, and I just want to say for the record, I will highly consider your nomination, and I think that with your expertise and your performance that I give you my support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Great. Thank you very much. And again, to Gita, thank you very much for being responsive, to our calls, and that we look forward to working hand in hand with you in this project, and as well as others that we're working on now. Okay, so this public hearing is now adjourned. The time is 3:51. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senators, thank you.